Hey guys, it's Dee. Welcome back to Delving into the Cold. This is October the 1st, so that means that it's the first episode of our Dark Happenings Month series. And if you're not familiar with what that is, you can go on to either, I think it's on my website, but I know for sure it's on my Tumblr and it's on my Patreon, what this month is going to be. It's going to have 6 episodes, and this is the first one of those, and it's all going to be based on dark, quote-unquote, content. So we're going to have, dark figures in history, their true story, urban legends, and then the end of the month, on Halloween Day, we're actually going to have the history of Halloween and my first ever top 5, and it's going to be the top 5 quote-unquote scary things that I'm interested in. So let's kind of dive into this episode, because it may be a long one. There's a lot of information to give out today, so let's just get started. We're going to talk about Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler, or maybe you know him as Dracula. And while Vlad may be one of the inspirations for Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, there's a big difference between the Dracula in the novel and who Vlad Tepes actually was. So we're gonna kind of get into what his real story is. The person that he actually is, as opposed to what popular media wants us to believe. He was known as Vlad the Third, Prince of, and I may mispronounce some of these words because they're Romanian and I apologize, but Wallachia. And obviously one of the biggest things that he's known for is impaling his enemies to keep his homeland safe and impart his own form of justice. But just like everyone else, he has a history, and we're kind of going to get into that and see, what made him the way that he was. So he was born in, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Travoski, in what is now Transylvania, in 1431. And at the time that he was born, it was the central region between two kind of opposing forces. And contrary to popular belief, he never even set foot on the location of Bran Castle, which is what is kind of known as Castle Dracula these days. He was never there. He never lived there. He certainly wasn't born there. And, so that's already a misconception from his story. At the time he was born, his father was a ruler of Wallachia, and there was a lot of conflict going on between the Muslim faction and the Christian faction. And so, unfortunately, that was just the atmosphere that Vlad grew up in. And his father was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, which is a knight organization, the year that he was born. And it gave Vlad II the name Dracul, which means Dracula. So it made Vlad Dracula, or son of Dracula, meaning son of the devil, or dragon, because devil is actually pronounced Draculia in Romanian. So there's kind of a tie there between dragon and devil, and a lot of people just kind of interpret it as they will, because Drac stands for devil, or the word Drac stands for devil, rather. The Order of the Dragon was created to defeat the Turks, or, the Ottoman Empire. And Wallachia itself was like dead center of the Christian and Muslim battle going on. So remember, this is where Vlad is growing up. So he's not only like probably learning his quote-unquote princely duties, which include, I'm assuming, how to conduct himself during, diplomatic events, but also probably learning a good bit about warfare. And not only that, he's not just learning about it, he's living in it. And I mean, that'll mess a kid up. But when Vlad was 12 years old, he and his brother Radu were kidnapped by the Ottoman Sultan Murad II. And this occurred while his father was handling some diplomatic duties. And actually, Vlad II was kidnapped as well, but he was released when he promised to leave Radu and Vlad III behind. He agreed that they could stay there if he could go back home and, run his country. And so the Sultan agreed that would benefit him quite well. While Vlad was there, he became a skilled warrior, and he learned how to maintain himself properly on the battlefield. He learned horsemanship. He learned just, a lot of what I assume would probably be very useful traits during the time for a young man. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't bitter, because the entire time that he was there, he just was so mad and so upset that he had been taken, and that, they had forced him and his brother to stay there as hostages. And while he was treated well, that still wasn't his home. That still wasn't where he wanted to be. But Radu was completely opposite. He completely accepted his captivity. He flourished, he thrived, he liked being with the Ottomans, and, it was just kind of a 180 from what Vlad was. In 1447, Vlad's father and his older brother, Markia, were killed, and so that left his kingdom vulnerable, and local noblemen took it over. So that just didn't sit well with Vlad. And in 1448, he began trying to regain the title. But at the time, Vladislav II was ruling Wallachia. And Vlad knew that he kind of had the Ottoman loyalty on his side because he had been with them for so long. So he gathered up an army from the Ottoman Empire, and they, kind of rushed the throne, and he won. But the only reason he won is because the ruler Vladislav II was at war at the time. So when Vladislav got back, he took the title back, and that completely enraged Vlad, and he eventually cut ties with the Ottomans and connected with Hungary. In 1453, he helped with the fall of Constantinople, and that kind of, set him on the path of being recognized as a huge military force in Wallachia. And, in 1456, he eventually won his title back. So he became the prince or the king of Wallachia. And as soon as he was on the throne, he decided that the Wallachians didn't know the Ottomans anything. So he completely severed ties with the Ottomans. And there had been kind of a tentative peace between the Ottomans and the Wallachians. And as soon as Vlad kind of took that monetary supplement away, the Ottomans were not happy about it. So it created huge tension. And So I think Vlad probably at this time realized that his hold on the title was pretty tentative. And this was a guy who, you have to remember, at the time was a huge military powerhouse. He had been in battles and he had helped conquer nations, and he wanted people to know that he was the boss and that nothing was going to stop him from getting what he wanted. So one thing that he did was invited like hundreds of politicians that wanted to oppose his title to his home. And when they got there, he stabbed them and then impaled them until they died. So he didn't stab them to death. He stabbed them and then impaled them, and they died, after they were impaled, I guess you could say. And stories like that are what kind of made people, they were spread, obviously, as, stories are, and they made people realize that Vlad is someone that deserved respect and that deserved to be feared, and which was his goal. He wanted people to recognize that he was in charge and that he was the person that would protect his country because it was his destiny. And one story, which I'm sure wasn't funny to the Ottomans, but he invited a group of Ottomans to his castle, and while they were there, they refused to remove their turban. Well, that insulted Vlad, and he got really mad about it. And so in retaliation, he nailed the turbans to their heads because they refused to remove them in his presence. So he just decided that if they wanted to wear them that badly, that he would make them wear them forever. And a lot of stories that you hear about Vlad are stories about how vicious he was and how his favorite thing to do was impale people. And while, that is a form of quote-unquote justice that he took, I don't think that he necessarily enjoyed it. I think that he thought that it helped his image and helped people realize that he was someone that would protect his country at all costs. But there are stories about how he kept his impaled victims all around the capital of Wallachia and actually outside of his home. And so it's one of those things where you want to kind of be devil's advocate and be like, okay, he was just doing what he had to do. But also, I don't think it was completely necessary that he, kind of put his victims out there like that and show them to the world. But it did leave a legacy, and because of his victories and because of the way that he reigned, he's become, a Romanian hero, because people considered him to be tough, but they also considered him to be just. But unfortunately, his reign didn't last forever. He was defeated by Mehmet II and exiled to Hungary, and he was imprisoned in Hungary. But the thing about that is, while he was also in Hungary, he took a wife and he had children. And while he was gone, Radu took over the throne. But unfortunately, Radu died in 1475. And Vlad returned to take his throne back in 1476. But unfortunately, he was killed in battle a few years later, or a short while later. So he didn't really get to reign that long. But if you look at Vlad's history, everything that he had done up to that point had been to help his home country, to help his homeland. And so it's not like he's the blood-sucking monster that's depicted in Dracula, but he definitely had his share of bloodshed. He created a lot of he created a lot of bloodshed, actually, for a lot of different people. And it was something that he took pride in, because in those days it was something that gave a man, the kind of air of power. Nobody really knows where he's buried. There's kind of a discrepancy. Some people think that he was buried in one monastery, some people think that he was buried in another monastery, so we don't really know where Vlad is buried, but it's likely in a church somewhere. So it was likely that he had a holy burial after dying in battle. And to me, it seems like Vlad was just doing what he thought that he had to do, and whether that was correct or not, it was what he thought was right, and it's what he thought would help his homeland, and so it's what he did. And you can't fault somebody for that, even if they are, going about it in the wrong way. So that's all I have on Vlad. He was an interesting guy, and I think the difference between him and the 1897 novel Dracula is you can kind of see that it's pretty vast difference. And sure, I'm sure that, Bram took some inspiration from Vlad III, but I'm not sure that he took much more than his name and possibly the location. Alright guys, that's all I've got for you today. As always, discussion is welcomed. I'll have another episode next week, continuing with Dark Happenings Month. So stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, it's Dee. Welcome back to Delving into the Cold. This is October the 1st, so that means that it's the first episode of our Dark Happenings month.